Tango 32 Charlie. Ending Oscar.
Thank you. Tango 32 Charlie, 5 to 10 down.
Okay, thanks. Tango 32 Charlie, up 5 to 10.
Since previous successful DX-peditions by the 5-Star DXs Association to Spratly Islands in 1998, Comoros in 2001, Rodriguez Island in 2004 and St Brandon Island in 2007, a new location was sought for their 2011 DX-pedition. After much deliberation, the location chosen was the rare and remote Christmas Island in the Pacific. Christmas Island should not be confused with the island of the same name located in the Indian Ocean near Australia. The 5-Star DXs Association chose this rare island for their 2011 radio DX-pedition using the call sign T32C. 2 years of intense planning culminated in one of the largest and most successful world-class British-led DX-peditions in recent years. This is that story. In amateur radio terms, Christmas Island was the 36th most wanted country by European operators and voted the 61st most wanted worldwide. It was even more sought after on the lower bands. It all started with a pre-visit and fact-finding mission to the intended DX-pedition site by Neville G3NUG and Don G3BJ. This was necessary before mounting a major multinational DX operation to determine whether a suitable site could be found. It was decided that the use of the government-owned Captain Cook Hotel to the north of the island, with its north-facing beach and clear takeoff towards Europe and the USA, would be an ideal location. Although the Captain Cook Hotel is not luxury accommodation, it does have bungalow-style chalets which would be ideally suited for installing a number of radio stations and an array of antennas right by the sea. The living conditions at the hotel are fairly basic, with comfortable beds and washing facilities, with a refrigerator providing constant supplies of fresh cold water, a must in the very hot climate. Many months of forward planning went into the preparation for this DX-pedition, and as we shall see, it wasn't without its major problems and setbacks. Many of the world's leading equipment manufacturers and DX associations provided valuable support for the DX-pedition, without which the venture would not have been possible. We're most grateful to them for their invaluable support. Much of the coaxial cable and antennas used on previous 5-Star expeditions had been stored in a warehouse belonging to Nevada Radio at Portsmouth, and all needed to be checked and tested before being loaded onto a shipping container for onward journey to Christmas Island. It was also necessary to purchase two 11 kVA diesel generators, as it was planned to run 10 stations with their associated 1 kilowatt linear amplifiers. It was uncertain whether the local hotel power supply would be able to cope with the enormous power load needed. All the equipment needed for the DX-pedition was to be packed into a large shipping container and shipped to Christmas Island in time for the arrival of the first team in September. A day had been set aside for this project, and as early as February 2011, a large container was packed and loaded full of all the essential equipment. Our major sponsor, Yaesu, provided us with 16 FTDX 5000 top-of-the-range transceivers and 16 Quadra 1 kilowatt linear amplifiers. These, along with the two 11 kVA generators, were carefully packed and loaded into the container. For security reasons, the container was fitted with a tracking device. The container was finally loaded onto a pickup truck before being transported to Southampton in the south of England for its long journey to Christmas Island via Singapore and Fiji. Visitors to the official DXpedition website could track the position and progress of the container. Over the coming months there was still plenty of work to do, choosing the international team of 32 experienced operators, publicising the DXpedition, giving talks to various radio clubs, acquiring more sponsorship, selling raffle tickets, and generally promoting the DXpedition through the world's DX bulletins and newsletters, thus creating worldwide awareness of the operation. All this intense planning culminated in a full team briefing in early July and a chance to meet other members of the team, perhaps for the first time.
Primarily, as I say there, for Japan and the Far East.
A full team manual was produced to ensure that each team member knew exactly what was expected of them. Then, in late August, a major setback occurred.
We had a series of broken promises by the people in Fiji, just broken promise as to the shipping date to Christmas Island from Fiji. In fact, eventually, that voyage never even materialized, and yet we're still being given promises that it would materialize in late July and early August. So, Chris, G3SVL, and I, Chris is in charge of logistics, decided that we would ship this container from Fiji to Tarawa. There's a much better chance, it seemed, then of getting a ship from Tarawa. Everything was going to plan. The container arrived in Tarawa in very early September, and it looked as though we could get a ship in Tarawa that would then take the container to Christmas. However, at the very last moment, that ship broke down.
Frantic strategies were put in place to determine what was required, from a long list of items to cover the missing kit stuck 2,000 miles away in the shipping container. Once again, our major sponsor Yaesu came to our rescue and provided us with 10 alternative transceivers, the FT450, whilst Heil provided us with the operator's headsets. The association needed to buy a large quantity of laptop computers for logging at each of the 10 radio stations. All this frantic activity to locate much-needed equipment and tools created a nightmare for the logistics officer, Chris, G3SVL.
We pulled together as a team, our sponsors came up trumps, and we decided that with a combination of the kit we own between us, the sponsorship, the additional bits we bought, including last-minute things that we actually bought in Honolulu on our routing out.
The day finally arrived when, in late September, the first of the two teams arrived from various parts of the world at the Ohana West Hotel in Honolulu. The following morning, the team were briefed at a meeting to discuss the logistics of the DXpedition.
To getting all this kit out tomorrow. On the island, the plan will be, after we've settled in tomorrow, to start making up a whole section, and I think it will be in the team room, but we have to wait and see what Neville's arranged.
A shopping list was compiled and a small team set off to purchase a few missing items, such as fuses, connectors and antenna clips. After all this daytime activity, there was time to relax in the evening and enjoy a team meal in the local Danish restaurant, and a chance to get to know some of the other team members as all part of that essential bonding process. Next morning, the team assembled in the hotel lobby prior to departure for the airport and onwards to Christmas Island. The team were each given their airline ticket for check-in with Air Pacific. With all the additional equipment that had to be hand-carried, the baggage allowance for the team was well overweight. Chris, G3SVL, and Bob, NBD0CCE, had frantic negotiations with the airline staff to try to reduce the cost of the 450-kilogram excess baggage. Then, after a great deal of negotiating, a price was finally agreed and we could be on our way. The journey took some 3 hours, and soon the team were preparing to land on the remote Christmas Island. The team leader, Neville G3NUG, was at the Cassidy International Airport waiting to meet and greet the arriving team. After immigration control and airport clearance, the team was loaded aboard 2 trucks for the short drive to the Captain Cook Hotel.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, and then you realise it's
Fixed up to put spider poles in.
Trick or treat, man.
After the evening meal, a welcome speech from Neville.
Isn't he kind? Didn't he look good with the little thingamy around his neck? What a lovely man. Right, entertainment officer. Well, welcome everyone, and we made it, despite the fact the bloody container is still on Tarawa, but we're up here nonetheless. Trish, who many of you will know, my lovely lady, said something to me very encouraging, very interesting as we left. She said, now darling, this will really test the 5-star DXs, because you don't now have all these super duper radios, you don't have the highest possible power, you don't have the very best antennas, but you still, I'm sure, will do a super job. They will test you all. So I thought that was actually rather an interesting thought.
Well, if you did that,
After the welcome speech, it was down to work discussing the layout of the stations and the location of the various antennas with the antenna king, Don G3XTT. It was decided to separate the stations as far as possible to reduce the amount of interstation interference when more than one mode was being used on the same band. Due to the severe heat from the sun, it was a 5 AM start. The team brought all the kit that they'd hand-carried from home and assembled it in the conference room, ready for the job of constructing all the new antennas. Due to the fact that the pre-constructed antennas were stuck in the shipping container, it meant the new antennas had to be built from scratch and taken to the beach ready for installation. It was decided to use phased verticals where possible to give extra forward gain. And as the beach was north-facing, this would give an unobstructed path to Europe and the US, whilst Japan and Asia would be off to the side. Meanwhile, the IT team were busy running cables to each of the radio rooms for connection to each of the station laptops for logging.
Hello there, my name is John Linford, I'm G3WGV, and for my sins I'm responsible for all the technology on the island, that's the networking and all the computer interfaces and so on. And that's actually quite a big undertaking. We've got something like, we've got 9 stations running, but we've got something like 20 laptops on the island, and all of these are networked together so that we can bring all of the QSOs back to a central point, and from that derive statistics about how the expedition is going, keep the expedition informed about what's happening, and of course upload logs to the club log so that the deserving can see that they're in the log.
Whilst another team began the task of setting up the radios in each of the 3 radio rooms. The Yaesu FT450 transceivers were coupled to several linear amplifiers that the team had brought with them, such as the ACOM, Expert, Tokyo, and a couple of home-built amplifiers. Whilst all this activity was going on, another team was checking the power wiring to each of the radio shacks. Once the stations had been assembled, it was also necessary to perform a power load test in each of the radio rooms.
We're just about to do some load testing on the main supply here, putting in the 4 linears one at a time, see what happens in terms of the current taken from the local generator. Then subsequent to that we'll be doing some mutual interference tests, so it should take about 10 minutes.
1 and 2 on.
Over the current, then we've got 32 amps here.
Yeah, we can't work at this, we've got 93 volts, so we're going to have to rethink this.
Well, that was 47 amps with 3 stations on.
Yeah, and the volts were down in the 90s, so we're going to have to do something about the volts anyway. We're going to have to go and figure the volts first, aren't we? Because these volts are unacceptably low and they're causing, I think they're causing amplifier problems.
I don't think that's going to solve it though. I think the current is so high that, well, we can up the volts, but we can up the volts for a start, and I think we'll need to put the short on between this other 20 amp breaker as well. Hi, I'm Bob G, full YOX Power King for T32 Charlie, and we're trying to get the system volts a little bit higher down to the operating position, so we're going to be increasing the volts here. Operates at 200 amp capacity, 15 kilowatts at the moment. We hope that will do the trick.
Meanwhile, back on the beach, the other antennas were being erected.
We're trying to erect as many antennas as we can to have 2 antennas on each band. So that's what this antenna is a 10-meter vertical dipole.
Soon all the main antennas were erected and the stations installed ready for the start of the DX-pedition. A final team briefing took place before the DX-pedition got underway.
Full power all together. I mean, you just need to check at the power plant that everything is stable, at least for 10 seconds, coinciding with full load.
Supplying the main supply to the 20-metre station. Thank you, Bob. Also, by putting a stub on the 20-metre station, brought it down by 10 dBs, and another stub on the 30 dB.
A decision had been made to enter the Oceania DX contest, so a team was put together. This gave us the best chance to test the antennas and make adjustments as necessary.
Alpha Hotel 8 Delta 591143.
Victor Alpha 7 Charlie Romeo Zulu, you're 591378, over.
Once the contest was over, it was down to some serious operating as the world waited for this rare location to finally come on the air. The pile-ups were enormous.
Okay, Kilo 2, Quebec, Echo 59.
Roger, also 59. See you later.
Thank you, 1032 Charlie, 5 to 10 down. Okay, Mike Lima.
Okay, 73, Tango 32 Charlie. Whiskey 4 Bravo Papa 59. Thanks, Tango 32 Charlie, 5 to 10 down. Yeah, Tango Mike again.
Charlie, up 5 to 10. Okay, the Japan Oscar. Okay, the 6 Oscar again. Kilo 6 Oscar 5 to 9.
To ensure a 24-hour round-the-clock operation, a daily operating schedule had been compiled showing the teams and bands that each team member would operate. This was pinned up in the team room. Team members could monitor the progress of the DX-pedition from the Starlog monitoring position in the team room. Team members could also choose other free operating slots by checking on the Starlog interface. There was also a running total of how many QSOs each team member was making. This was always an interesting aspect of the expedition, as it produced a competitive element to the operating. Careful monitoring of the DX cluster alerted stations all over the world as to the operating frequencies and modes. The team room was also the place where an internet connection was available, where emails and messages could be sent to loved ones back home through the use of the Captain Cook's own satellite communication system. So how was all this technology made available to us?
Hello, I'm Mike G7VJR. I've been busy on LF, CW, working Europeans when possible. Conditions have been pretty tough down there, and we've been lucky to have good openings on the high band, so plenty of CW going on up there as well. While I haven't been on the air, I've been helping with the computer network, making sure all the logging's going smoothly, and looking after the online logs. We've been lucky here on Christmas Island to have a satellite uplink, which is just here on my left. And this is providing us with connectivity for internet log uploads, checking on the DX cluster, and generally making sure that we're doing the right thing on the bands. So this has been a surprise. This wasn't here when we did the pre-visit to Christmas Island, and it's made things a lot better. So hopefully the internet connections helped you workers, and we'll continue to use that as the expedition goes on to make sure we make the most of all the openings.
At 1:30 p.m. each day, a team meeting was arranged to discuss any outstanding issues and to review the way in which the DX-pedition was going.
Can you just carefully check that
Each head of department was asked whether there were any issues that needed to be addressed.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Uncle.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Louder. Have you got that, Fred? Okay, right. Oh, bloody hell.
Have you got that, Fred?
If you don't, it's all over your microphone.
Hey, oh God, is there? Right. Well, we'll do 60,000 in a few hours' time. I mean, tremendous result. 5 days, 60,000. Absolutely wonderful. Can't be better. And that is absolutely wonderful. We've done 18,000 uniques worldwide, and we've done 260 unique Gs. Right. Don, have you got something to say about just a bit more about the antenna cleanup and what the plan is? Please.
We're working on what the projects are. We'll do some other antenna work at the same time, but it is a case of cleaning up the connectors, getting the salt off, getting everything ready for the weekend. We need to check the guys. Some of them have come loose. There's very strong wind during the night. All of those things, just generally checking them all out, making sure they're going to last another week, putting some more radials on if appropriate on the verticals and so on.
Don G3XTT, responsible for antennas here on Christmas Island.
The original plan was we were going to have a set of Yagis for the high bands at one end of the island, and then at this end of the beach where I am now we were going to have verticals for the various bands. They would be facing north and would give us a low angle takeoff on the difficult paths to North America and Europe. The Yagis would be useful for Japan, but they would also cover the long path, that is to say south over the island, over land, and down over the South Pole and into Europe that way. Unfortunately, with no container here on Christmas, we've had to make do with what we could bring over on the aircraft, and that's fiberglass poles. These are spider poles for the most part. So we've set up 2-element vertical arrays on 10 through 20 meters. We've got a quarter wave vertical on 30 and on 40 and indeed on 80, and a T antenna on 160, and they're all working very well indeed out over the sea to the north.
The pile-up is well behaved, especially when the team leader gets on the microphone to do his share of the operating.
November Zulu 8 to Japan, you're 5 at 9. Thank you, Tango 32 Charlie. Again, Tango. K3, Lima Tango, you're 5 at 9.
Christmas Island is a Pacific atoll in the Northern Line Islands and is part of the Republic of Kiribati, whose island capital is called Tarawa and lies some 2,000 miles west from Christmas Island. Christmas Island lies 140 miles north of the equator and is in the world's farthest forward time zone at GMT plus 14 hours, and is the first inhabited place on Earth to experience the new year each year. A monument stands in the grounds of the Captain Cook Hotel and indicates the first location on Earth where the new millennium was celebrated. The population of Christmas Island is a mere 5,000 inhabitants and covers an area of some 125 square miles. The entire island is a wildlife sanctuary and access to 5 particularly sensitive areas is restricted. The frigate bird frequently displays a red inflatable throat pouch during courtship beginning in December and peaking in March. The white-capped noddy in its simple platform nest, the masked booby with its ground nest, and a pair of fairy terns all find Christmas Island a haven to rear their young, untouched by modern living. Christmas Island was uninhabited when a British expedition commanded by Captain James Cook landed on Christmas Eve 1777. The DX-pedition Hotel was named after this British explorer. For most of the century, Christmas Island was ruled by the British, together with another small chain of atolls to the west, under the joint name of the Gilbert and Ellis Island Colony. Visitors come to the island because of its excellent fishing, as some of the DXpedition team discovered.
We took a lot out of it, but it took out the first part of the reel.
Just down and up. Yeah, here he comes. Here he comes. Not far.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's there. Yeah, he's not far away.
Bloody hell, look at that.
Woo!
Like
you got
it.
the lure back with your line.
Oh, it's a fly fish. Yeah.
It was fly fish. What is it? Is it a killer?
It's the one you lost.
Whoa!
Wow.
Wow.
Well, that is my biggest fish ever. Wow.
Incredible. Incredible.
Who pulled that one in? Tony Sam. Well done.
Full story is Tony hooked it, lost it. I then rehooked it, pulled it in.
Uncle one.
It took about half an hour. Yeah.
Christmas Island is perhaps better known for the nuclear tests conducted in the region by Britain in the late 1950s and by the United States in 1962. Traditional life is subsistence life, living off the sea and the land with little dependence on trade and little to trade with. Though Christmas Island has plenty of coconut palms and some pandanus, its dwellings retain but a functional similarity to these Gilbert standards. Replacing the huts of other atolls are rows of military housing with corrugated metal roofs, remnants of World War II and the atomic testing program. Christmas Islanders are proud of their unique traditions. Each child attends a school and has a deeply spiritual outlook on life. The Christmas Islanders are very open, warm, friendly and trusting people. Nothing is ever too much trouble since they always want to please their guests. Their smiles are very infectious. One still hears among the Gilbertese the deep, easy laughter of the truly rich, and feels that if all the trappings of modern life were to suddenly vanish, if one day all the power were to be turned off, Christmas Islanders would hardly miss a step, gracefully adapting to one or more of life's transitions. Even the license plates on the cars are very unique. The island secretary has the distinctive Xmas 1 number plate. For the international DX-peditioners, some respite from the grueling radio pile-ups was a privileged chance to see traditional Gilbertese dancing, performed exclusively by local dancers and singers. While the performance was taking place, there was still the serious business of racking up the number of QSOs. T32C signals were heard in all corners of the world. Here the signals were heard in Florida, the kitchen staff worked hard to provide food which was rich and plentiful. There was always a wide variety of choice. One wonders whether the abundance of the wild crabs that scamper around the hotel found their way onto the menu. A chance to relax over a cool beer was welcome, and a chance for the team to let their hair down a little. A trip had been arranged to pop into the main town of London to meet with the island secretary to discuss ways by which we could repay their hospitality by providing some spare parts for their aging power generators. Meanwhile, back at the DXpedition site, the number of QSOs was nearing the magic 100,000 mark.
Well done, guys. Well done. Well done, Gerard.
It was time to celebrate and a chance to give those loud T-shirts an airing in the all too famous 5-star DX's loud T-shirt party.
And down to 4.
Kilo Mike Alpha 59.
The celebrations continued with a special barbecue.
I saw Mummy kissing Santa Claus. On the first day of Christmas, Uncle gave to me a Yezo 450. On the second.
and a chance to hear Captain Cook's very own harmony trio. Due to the antennas being installed directly on the beach, the electrical connections were subject to corrosion from the salt water and needed to be checked and repaired if necessary.
Okay, after a week on the beach, copper oxide and copper eating its way back down, and I've already cut off 4 inches.
Each antenna will need to be lowered and the connections checked for corrosion. Once the antennas had been repaired and restored, it was back to business as usual. Some of the major goals of the T32C expedition were to give every station in the world the opportunity to have at least one QSO, and to enable top DXs to log as many QSOs on as many bands and modes as possible, and to exploit as many openings to Europe as possible. It all got too much for some of the overworked team. Dream on, Tony. It was soon time for the first team to leave the island and head for home, and for the second team to replace them. As they leave the island, what was their personal impression of the DXpedition?
Having known many of the other guys from other DXpeditions makes for a very good team where we all work well together.
It's been 2 fantastic weeks as the first part of the team for T32 Charlie. I think everyone's really happy. Everyone has put in a lot of effort over the last few days. We're ready to go home. We've had a fantastic time.
Well, I think the expedition exceeded my expectations. We had a lot of fun, great team, great pile-ups, many QSOs. We made 108,000 contacts plus, and so we leave another 100,000 contacts for H2. So we had a great time.
Well, the DXpedition was great. Lots of interesting propagation, lots of openings, stretching the grey line around the world on 12 meters. When the band was closed, we were working all the way through to 5B4 AGN. Hi, Bob.
Well, my first major DXpedition, and it's really been quite an experience. A lot of it meeting new friends and meeting new people, having a great time operating radios, of course, and talking with friends back home in the pile-ups. It's kind of a fun thing to do too.
The second team of operators arrived on the island to be greeted again by Neville. Since the antennas had already been erected, there was little for the new team to do except take their turn at operating on the various bands. Promises had been made that some operation would take place on the 6-meter band, so a multi-element Yagi antenna was constructed and directed facing the moon.
We're doing some moon bounce, and these are the stations that are being decoded from their signals bouncing off the moon. Right now we're looking at G8BCG, S59A, and 7NW.
Some experiments were made to see if moon bounce operation would work. There was also a big demand for some RTTY operation. The Starlog program lent itself well to this mode, and soon many QSOs were being made, making stations all over the world very happy. Excitement was looming as the QSO rate neared the all-time record total of 200,000 contacts. All eyes were glued to the monitor in the team room. The team could hardly contain their excitement as the magic score was reached. Once this magic score had been realized, it was time to give those loud t-shirts another airing and have a party to celebrate a new world record. It was also time to crack open the champagne brought to the island for this special occasion. The hotel staff laid on some more musical entertainment for the new team. Again, the antennas had to be lowered and checked for corrosion caused by the salt water from the sea. Some of the new team set sail for a day's fishing and managed to catch some rather large fish.
I hooked him on the side, yeah.
During the operation, a site visit was made by the secretary from the Ministry of the Line and Phoenix Islands Development Board. He left a message for the DXpedition.
Hello, my name is Manicos and I'm very happy to welcome you to Christmas Island. This is a beautiful island with beautiful people. We have a lot of birds here, wildlife. It's great fishing out there in the ocean. When you go fishing, you can catch a wide range of fish like tuna, bluefin tuna, bonefish. You can see manta rays and dolphins here. You can also go and see a lot of wildlife in the bush, frigate birds and white terns and a whole range of wildlife out there in the bush. So I would like to welcome and invite you to come to Christmas Island. We will radio operators, fishermen, surfers, and any tourists who want to visit Christmas Island. Thank you.
Sadly, the DXpedition was drawing near to a close and it was time to start taking down the antennas for those bands which were not being used. A final clean-up of the beach and hotel site was underway. Some cable and equipment was left for use by any other DXpedition that may use the hotel in future. All the staff of the Captain Cook Hotel worked hard to make our stay as comfortable as possible.
Maori, my name is Sinia Tauriaria and I'm the manager of the Captain Cook Hotel. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to say a few words. We've been looking forward to having this group arrive in Christmas Island. This was planned 2 years ago by the 5-Star DXs Association, and we're very excited that we finally had the opportunity to meet this group. It's the first opportunity for the hotel to have a large group of ham radio operators staying for a whole month, and we've loved having this wonderful group of gentlemen staying. They've been very nice, and the staff have been very happy to have them here. And we hope that we may have the opportunity to have some more ham radio operators coming as a result of this wonderful trip. And thank you very much.
T32C will be recorded as one of the world's most successful DXpeditions to date. And despite all its logistical problems, a truly dedicated team pulled together to break many world records. Our grateful thanks to our global sponsors and to anyone else who contributed towards this truly 5-star DXpedition.
Don't say farewell. Don't say goodbye. Don't say farewell. Please don't say goodbye. Hope to see you again.